Untold Stories. Soldiers in the Ukraine War. The war in Ukraine, which began in 2014 and intensified in 2022 after Russia launched a full-scale invasion, has emerged as a crucial and terrifying episode in contemporary European history. In the thick of strategic deliberations and geopolitical analysis, the individual accounts of soldiers on the ground are frequently left out. These soldiers, both Russian and Ukrainian, bear the psychological and physical wounds of combat while facing unspeakable adversity and having to make difficult decisions. Although their stories are overshadowed by the larger battle, they provide an insightful and sympathetic viewpoint on the war. Soldiers from Ukraine fight for their country and sovereignty because of a strong sense of responsibility and loyalty to their country. Russian soldiers struggle with moral quandaries and disappointment since they are frequently forced into a battle that they do not completely comprehend or accept. Families that are split apart and the severe psychological effects on those who serve are just two examples of the human cost of the battle. Nevertheless, despite the violence, there are times when kindness and humanity come through, serving as a reminder of the perseverance and common suffering of those ensnared in the war machine. By examining hitherto unreported tales, we hope to pay tribute to these warriors' experiences and highlight the significant effects that the conflict in Ukraine had on both people and communities. 1. The soldiers of Ukraine. Guardians of autonomy. Soldiers from Ukraine are fighting for their country, their families, and their sovereignty. Many felt a strong sense of duty and patriotism, which led them to enlist in the military or volunteer battalions. Consider Suri, an Lviv-born mechanic, who is 32 years old, who joined the Ukrainian armed forces soon after Russia annexed Crimea in 2014. The war is personal to Suri. Since his grandparents had experienced the atrocities of World War II and Soviet tyranny, he felt a great duty to defend his country from future foreign invasion. Suri's tale is one of fortitude and selflessness. He and his allies endured daily bombardment, sniper fire, and the continual fear of dying while stationed in the Donbas region. The winters were extremely cold, and the summers were quite hot, making life in the trenches nearly intolerable. However, Suri developed strong bonds with his fellow troops and a sense of brotherhood, despite the hardships. They formed a brotherhood that turned into their greatest source of strength, sharing everything from food and water to stories and worries. The moving tale of Olena, a Ukrainian nurse who volunteered to fight on the front lines, is another. Olena's transition from a civilian to the battlefield serves as evidence of the bravery and tenacity of Ukrainian women involved in this war. She provided first-hand testimony to the atrocities of war while caring for the injured, frequently doing so under fire. Deep psychological scars were left behind by the anguish of witnessing young troops, some of whom were still in their teens, slain and crippled. Nonetheless, Olena's unwavering devotion to saving lives and helping her allies serves as a testament to the extraordinary bravery and devotion of Ukrainian medical staff during the conflict. 2. The Russian troops, entangled in the war machine. However, despite the fact that their tales are just as painful and nuanced, Russian soldiers are frequently depicted as the aggressors. Many young Russian men were drafted into a war that they could not completely comprehend or agree with. One such soldier was Dmitry, a conscript from a small Siberian hamlet, who was 21 years old. In an attempt to raise his family and get out of poverty, he enlisted in the army, only to be thrust into a bloody and unpopular conflict. The moral dilemmas and disillusionments that many Russian soldiers endure are reflected in Dmitry's experiences. He talked about being caught between his principles and his soldier's duty, as he saw the destruction and suffering brought forth by the fighting. Dmitry considered the moral ramifications of his conduct. Feeling alone and hopeless was brought on by the psychological effects of taking part in the invasion and his fear of reprisals from his superiors and the Ukrainian soldiers. A similar moral and ethical conundrum confronted career officer Alexei. He had spent more than 10 years serving in the Russian military and had seen firsthand how the troops' morale and trust were declining. He didn't support the cause of the conflict in Ukraine, but he felt obligated to follow orders and hold his ground. Alexei's narrative reveals an internal struggle to balance his personal convictions with his feeling of duty. 3. The human cost. Split families. On both sides, the battle has left a path of destroyed lives and broken families. Every soldier has a family that is dreading the worst and is waiting nervously for news. Odessa native Maria, a mother of two, talks of her husband's sleepless nights and ongoing concern for him while he fights on the front lines. Every day, Maria's small children, who are unable to comprehend the intricacies of war, inquire about their father, and she finds it difficult to protect them from the awful truths. The tale of young mother Anna in Russia reflects a similar feeling. She was left to care for their infant by herself after her husband was recruited and transported to Ukraine. Her life has become a daily struggle due to the stigma attached to being connected to the conflict, her uncertainty and anxiety for his safety, and other factors. The combat has a wide-ranging effect on not only the soldiers but also their loved ones, as Anna's narrative demonstrates. 4. The toll on the mind. Stress after trauma and beyond. It is impossible to overestimate the psychological effects of the war in Ukraine on soldiers. Veterans frequently suffer from anxiety, sadness, and post-traumatic stress disorder (PTSD). Long-lasting wounds result from the ongoing exposure to violence, the loss of allies, and the moral harm experienced throughout the battle. Sergei has found it difficult to adjust to civilian life again. The sound of fireworks or a car blowing up sends him back to the battlefield during severe flashbacks. Since Ukraine's veteran support networks are still in their infancy, many soldiers like Sergei find it difficult to reintegrate into society. As the conflict rages, Ukraine has to confront a key issue: the need for comprehensive mental health treatment for veterans. His sense of desertion and loneliness was made worse by the government's lack of recognition and assistance. The problem is made more difficult by the stigma in Russia surrounding psychiatric assistance, which forces many veterans to deal with their pain in private. 5. Humanitarian deeds. Discovering light in the shadows. There are times when compassion and humanity prevail despite the savagery of war. Narratives of warriors from opposite sides lending a hand to one another, tending to wounded adversaries, and engaging in acts of generosity serve as a reminder of our common humanity, which is unaffected by warfare. The tale of Andrei, a Ukrainian soldier who discovered a wounded Russian conscript on the battlefield, is one such instance. In spite of the dangers, Andrei made sure the young soldier was taken to a medical facility and administered first aid. This humanitarian gesture highlights how difficult it may be to distinguish between allies and enemies when there is mutual suffering. Comparably, stories exist of Russian soldiers giving up or defecting in order to stay out of the fighting. These deeds, which are frequently driven by a desire to stop more deaths, show the moral complexity and individual bravery of people caught up in the war machine. 6. The way ahead. Conciliation and healing. The need for healing and reconciliation grows more pressing as the battle in Ukraine drags on. The accounts of troops from opposing sides highlight the conflict's tremendous suffering and our common humanity. It is imperative that both Russian and Ukrainian societies address the psychological and emotional scars left by conflict. It is imperative that Ukraine provides comprehensive mental health treatment, job opportunities, and social reintegration initiatives to serve soldiers and their families. Rebuilding the nation will require acknowledging the sacrifices made by its warriors and giving them the tools they require to rehabilitate and start afresh. It is equally crucial to overcome the stigma around mental health care in Russia, as it is to support veterans. Conciliation can be facilitated by having an honest conversation about the reality of war and the experiences of the armed forces. 7. Final thoughts. The unsung tales of soldiers lost in the battle in Ukraine serve as a potent reminder of the human cost of war. The real victims of war are the soldiers and their families, not the geopolitical ramifications or strategic maneuvers. Their courageous, selfless, and excruciatingly painful experiences show the depths of the human spirit and the long-lasting effects of war on people and communities. As we consider these tales, we must remember the fortitude and humanity of those who have fought, and we must strive toward a time when disputes of this nature are settled amicably and constructively in order to save future generations the atrocities of war. Let us know in the comments what you think about the untold stories of soldiers in the Ukraine war. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more captivating content on our YouTube channel.